Hello, and welcome to A Dash of Salt. I'm Dr. Shelley Ann, and I'm so glad you're here. Whether you stumbled upon this podcast by accident or you're here because the subject drew you in, welcome. SALT is an acronym for Society and Learning Today. This podcast was created as an outlet for inviting fresh discussions on sociology and learning theories that impact your world. Each episode includes a wide range of themes that focus on society and everyday learning, whether formal or informal. So let's get stuck in, shall we? Welcome to A Dash of Salt. Today I'm joined by Hayley Myerscough. Hayley is currently a student teacher completing her first year of a 2-year program in the Professional Masters in Primary Education. She's just completed her first school placement and has begun substitute teaching in local primary schools to cover for teachers who are out sick or need other or scheduled leave time off. Hayley completed her undergrad in Maynooth University in sociology and geography. She went on to work in Toronto, Canada for 2 years in mortgage administration, while also providing private tutoring and voluntary work in the Leading to Reading program at the Toronto Library. After returning home to Ireland, Hayley worked in a bank and began application for the next step in her educational journey, the Professional Masters in Education, which is where she is now. In her spare time, Hayley also volunteers as a Girl Guide leader and facilitates a growing Instagram account that's called @TheTeacherStudent, where she discusses her experiences on the initial teacher education program and provides encouragement and support for others interested in teaching and education. Hayley, I'm delighted to have you on the podcast to speak with you about your volunteering experiences, the things that you've learned through volunteering, your road to the PME, and your platform on Instagram. We have so much to unpack today, and I'm so delighted to be speaking with you. You're always so full of energy, and you're such a delight. So welcome.
Thanks so much, Shelley. I'm delighted to be on your podcast finally.
Now that placement is behind you, we can have a great discussion. So we're going to begin with your volunteer experiences. And as you know, Hayley, my research really looked at volunteer influence, exposure, and experience of active adult volunteers to find out how and why they became involved in volunteering, what it means to them, and whether their formal and learning influenced their volunteer experience, and to provide further insight and understanding of the relationship between identity and learning through volunteering. So I'm very interested in the relationship between your past and current volunteering experiences, what you've learned through volunteering, and if it's impacted your decision to become a primary school teacher. So what is your earliest memory of volunteering, or maybe awareness of what volunteering was or what it meant to volunteer?
I suppose going back to when I was in primary school, there's actually a day in February called Thinking Day. And on Thinking Day, Girl Scouts and Girl Guides all around the world that are members of WAGs, which is World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts, they wear their uniform into school. Now, I went to a school where, you didn't wear your own clothes. You wore a formal uniform. And on Thinking Day, students were allowed to wear their Girl Guide uniform if they were a member. Now, at the time, I wasn't a member, and I remember thinking to to myself and saying it to my mom and dad, I really want to be part of this. I really want to hear more. And at the time, I remember there was a really long waiting list to get into the local unit. So that was, I suppose, my first kind of glimpse at any sort of organization that would have been of any kind of voluntary work. That being said, I finally got in when I was 10 years old. And I was a guide myself, and then I went to being a young leader and then a warranted leader once I turned 18. And there's also a thing called senior branch, which captures girls in and around kind of late teens up until 30. So they organize activities themselves. But once I started going to guides myself, I started seeing the work, say, that the leaders were doing, and that really inspired me, because just all the skills that they had, just being able to speak and organize and have fun. I didn't see volunteer work so much as a chore. It was more something that was a pastime and something that was fun. So I suppose that's my earliest memory, was attending Girl Guides myself. And yeah, how I kind of fell into that little passion that I have on the side.
And so you said that, you know, you kind of got inspired in the Girl Guides
Mhm.
with volunteering. Would you say who or what do you believe was your inspiration for volunteering? Was it anybody or anything specific?
Um, well, I think the leaders that I had at the time, they were, not only were they kind of, I suppose, not authoritative, but they were just very clear and direct and had good boundaries. I suppose just I just loved how it was organized. I loved how it wasn't the people that say I was in school with, but there was other girls that were there. And I just enjoyed the variety that it offered. Like I did loads of things I like as well after school, like extracurricular activities. And yeah, okay, I enjoyed them, like speech and drama, Irish dancing. However, all these kinds of activities are all incorporated in Girl Guide. So it was just much broader than it just being so specifically to one thing, because I never saw myself as becoming like a professional Irish dancer, or like, you know, going on to win trophies or anything for speech and drama, or, you know, becoming a professional swimmer or life saver or saver or
Hmm.
whatever it is. I never saw, I suppose, a longevity in that. And I did in the guides because I thought, you know, it suited me, it suited my characteristics and my skills. And yeah, that's, I suppose, why it was important to me
And
at the
did you
time.
find that during primary or post-primary school that you did any other types of actual volunteering?
I'd have to have a think about that. It's mainly Girl Guides, because I wouldn't have viewed the Girl Guides as a voluntary organization until I had finished as being a guide, and then I went into being a young leader, because that was really when I was giving up my own time. I'm not really paying my termly fees. You know, that's kind of covered because you're then offering your time to guide. You know, so that was really, I suppose, around after my junior cert. So age 15, 16, 17, that kind of in between age is when you kind of get I suppose, like your first glimpse at like what voluntary work is. So up until that point, not really. I know at one point though, in transition year, which is like the year in between like your junior cert and before you start like actually studying for the Leaving Cert, I volunteered in a shop, like a charity shop in town. So when we were in fourth year on a Wednesday, we would go in for 3 classes and then we could leave. It wasn't like a full day of 9 classes. And myself and my 2 friends, actually, they're on Instagram as well, but Katja and Annabelle, the 2 of them, they won't mind me saying their names. We used to go in and we'd take in all these bags of clothes, and I remember we'd sort through them. So that was, I suppose, the second time I kind of ever thought about voluntary work. So it was having that opportunity in transition year. But my heart was still in the Girl Guides, just with my friends and stuff. That was more like a glimpse of like retail, I suppose. I didn't really feel that I was volunteering per se, like it was volunteering, but it was more something that was part of transition year. Whereas this, all of the Girl Guides is totally separate to school. So yeah.
And you said that after college, after
Yeah.
university, you did some volunteering with the Leading to Reading program. And what kind of volunteering do you do now?
So when I lived in Canada, I really wanted to get involved in some sort of professional tutoring that would stand to me when I came back to apply for my master's in primary teaching. So what I did was I contacted like a tutoring company, and I met with the director that like owned the franchise of the company. And she said to me, Hayley, this is great, and you know, it's great with all your experience with the Girl Guides and stuff, but what I would recommend before you start like getting involved into the tutoring, you'd need to build up some kind of Canadian experience. So she recommended the Leading to Reading program in the library. So I went to the library. I you know, I investigated it out, and yeah, it was really good because we got some training, and then you were before. So it was actually good because you were meeting like students and children in a public place before moving into private tutoring, which will be going into their home. Now, obviously, you'd have to get like guard vetted or screened, or I don't know what it's called over there, but it's a different name. So yeah, I suppose that was the voluntary work I did, and then I, you know, eventually got into the paid tutoring. But I did enjoy the voluntary work. That, and then at the minute now I'm a leader I'm back in the Girl Guides back home, and we meet once a week now. It's been quite kind of difficult, so because I started to get back into it in January of 2020, and then we went into a lockdown, so that was a bit problematic. And then we met up a few times through the summertime when we could in groups, but we'd have to meet like in smaller groups, and then obviously we went back into another lockdown, so it's just been a bit difficult. But I'm happy to probably, like, I'm going back to it now after, because I took a break with school placement and stuff, and things now are starting to open up. So yeah, I'm excited to see what they're all up to.
So I noticed that you did sort of a fun little activity recently with your Girl Guides that you spotlighted or highlighted on your Instagram account, and that was making lip balm.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and did you do that virtually with your student or with your students, with your Girl Guides, or did you
Yeah.
do it in one of your small groups?
Yeah, so it's quite difficult to plan, like, to keep girls entertained just doing the normal things. So we like, obviously at the start of lockdown we looked at what badges we might not necessarily do if we were meeting in the hall, like your green finger badge or like your book badge, or we did like fire safety badge. Like, you can make like great PowerPoints and games and like different things like that. And then obviously once we kind of had tired everything out, we started looking at other cool options that we could do. So yeah, one of them was making lip balms, which was very fun, very different. It was like bringing in science and stuff, and especially with young girls it's really important, like with STEM and stuff. So yeah, we had like a guest, like a guest on, that like did the whole like thing with, like, you know, safety and stuff, like making sure that the pegs were like covered in tin foil so that the peg doesn't go on fire. So yeah, that was really good.
And it was all done virtually.
It was all done virtually, yeah. So the company sent the packs out to each of the children's home, like each of the girls' homes, and yeah, it was very good.
Yeah, it looked like it was a lot of fun. It looked like it was a great success. Now, I'm going to ask you to try to think of your fondest memory or experience of volunteering, and why would you consider that your fondest memory?
There there was an international camp a few years ago in Lough in Roscommon. I don't know if you're familiar with Lough, and there's like an island in the middle of the water, like the lake, and we rowed out to the island and we made our own forts to sleep. Like, we stayed there for the night, which was really cool. It was kind of like a survival like weekend, and that was really fun. I really enjoyed that at the time. Like, it was just very different, very adventurous. And yeah, I suppose that would be one of my fondest memories. I'm trying to think now. Another one, actually, I went to Holland. I went to the Netherlands, and that was good. I went as a leader, but it was with like the guides that were a bit older. So yeah, that was really fun. Just great memories. We got to sit in the cockpit on the airplane and just had a great laugh, really. And yeah, we got to go to Anne Frank's house and stuff, like just fun things that girls love to do.
Yeah,
Just
well, a
hang
lot of
out.
learning and enrichment in that type
Yeah.
of volunteering experiences,
Mhm.
both of what you learn for yourself, but also what you watch and see the growth that happens with the young people that you're sort of leading as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And as well, a lot of things that I've done, that I would never have done it if I wasn't a member of the guides. Like, I mean, I'm not like, on your weekend you're not going to think to go to Roscommon, go to the lake, row out to the lake, and then sleep there, and then row back the next morning. So yeah, it comes with like great like spontaneity, and it's very adventurous, and you wouldn't really do it otherwise if it wasn't just randomly organized.
And why is volunteering important to you?
Um, Volunteering is important to me, I guess, because it allows you to see a different side of you that you wouldn't normally see. Like, volunteer work, it's work. Like, don't get me wrong, it can be very tiring at times. However, you kind of surprise yourself with voluntary work at what you can do, and the difference that you can make, for not only yourself but for those around you. You can create a whole lifestyle around it, and you can meet people from different backgrounds as well. with different skills and stuff. Like I'm training to be a primary school teacher. More than likely, majority of my friends are going to be teachers, that I'm going to make now in my professional career. So it's nice having that outlet where, you're meeting people who aren't teachers, and you're meeting people maybe that are nurses or architects or accountants or whatever it may be. So yeah.
Yeah. And do you think that over the years of your volunteering that you've done in Canada and here in Ireland, do you think that you yourself have learned from your volunteer experiences? And if so, what?
Yeah, I do think I've learned. I think I've learned to stick with a passion. I suppose when I applied to get into my master's, I didn't get in the first time, and volunteer work is consistent. You stay with your voluntary work, whereas when you're in, like, say, paid employment, or you're trying to get into a certain course, that's not always guaranteed, but it's nearly that it's guaranteed with voluntary work, because you're giving your time. I know you're giving your time in both ways. I do think that, like, you're giving your time to something, so I suppose that's what stays consistent. But when it's not you making the decision in terms of, the company is paying you, or like, not consistent, it's more like it's like a transaction, but you're instigating it.
Mhm. And
Do
I'm
you
sure
get?
it's more meaningful to
Yeah.
do something that you know that you enjoy doing, and you're doing it because you want to, and not because you're expecting a reimbursement for it, or to be paid for it.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not looking for that paid reward. However, you can find jobs that you will get that paid reward. Like teaching, don't get me wrong, it's not completely different to girl guiding. Like there is similarities there, and that's absolutely great that I found that. And I know for many people who haven't found their passion and haven't found what they wanted to do, sometimes volunteer work can help you make that decision.
Ah, good point. And we're going to be actually getting on to your road to the PME in here in just a minute. But one last question about volunteering, and then we're going to move on.
Yeah.
Do you think that your formal education, so your primary education, your post-primary education, your third level education, do you think that your formal education impacted your desire to volunteer? And if so, why?
I do think so. Because with me volunteering in the Girl Guides, it gave me an opportunity of what it's like to lead and to inspire and to help. And the role is very similar to it being a teacher and being a guide or a facilitator. So, and especially like with me saying about, the World Thinking Day thing about, the girls wearing their uniform into school, like, had I not been in formal education, I wouldn't have seen that. So that informed me. Also having the experience of, seeing what it's like on the flip side of being the guide leader without being paid for it. It's giving you an insight into the characteristics and skills that are required to get into a profession.
And so now we're going to talk about your road to the PME, because when I met you, one of the very first things that struck me was your passion, and again, sort of maybe you'll tell a little bit of the background of um, how you made alluded to it earlier about not getting in the first time,
Yeah.
and you kind of sticking with it. But when did you
Mhm.
know that you wanted to become a primary school teacher? When was that aha moment for you?
To be honest, it's all I've ever imagined myself. Now, when you're applying for your CAO, when you're about to sit your Leaving Cert, you're thinking, oh, but will primary teaching be for me? And, you're looking at, oh, well, this is how much primary teachers make. And, well, this is what I'd make if I worked here. And there'd be, if you're in like the private sector, and, and like, would it be better if I worked in a bank, or would it be better if I didn't go to college? Would it be better if I did like a skill, or, as a hairdresser, or, because they make fantastic money, and it's like weighing up, like, well, what kind of lifestyle, I guess, that you want to have. I mean, let's face it, teachers aren't the most rich people. Like, they may be rich in like memories, and maybe rich in, I suppose, giving guidance and help and all the great characteristics, but they're not, wealthy, rich, unless they take the teaching onto something else. So I suppose when I think back to when around that time, I remember like my friends having conversations about, oh, well, you're kind of limited then when you're a teacher, you're kind of limited to schools, and and that's it. When actually, in fact, it's not, because education is so broad. Like there's so much in education, whether you wanted to teach, a specific age level, additional needs, if you wanted to teach, in more kind of DESH areas, or, in non-DESH areas. Like there's so much speciality, in my opinion. When I think back to like when I was a child, when I actually wanted to be a teacher, I think like I used to play like teacher with my friends, and I just loved the organization of it, and I loved like making we had like little copybooks where we'd make our own little games, and we draw little pictures and guess what letter that is, and we used to swap them then with our friends, and just really loved it.
I have a lot of international listeners. Provide a little bit of an explanation as to when you're sitting your Leaving Cert and what the points mean and how that tracks you sometimes into specific areas of what you might, go into. If you can explain that a little bit, then we'll go on to the next question.
Yeah, so you go to primary school first, so junior infants, senior infants, which is like kindergarten, then it's first to sixth class. Then you go to secondary school, and secondary school it's first to third year, and then fourth to sixth year. But your fourth year in many schools is not compulsory. For me in my school it was compulsory, so I did fourth year. However, in your fifth and sixth year, these are your years where you're going to sit your Leaving Cert. Now the Leaving Cert has a maximum of 625 points. Now the extra 25 points, it used to be 600 points. With the extra 25 points, you get that if you pass higher level math. So it's encouraging students to take the higher level paper. So you have ordinary level paper, you have a foundations level paper, you have a higher level paper. So depending on like the courses and what you want to do, you might have to take a higher level subject, or you might have to, or you might have the leeway to take an ordinary level subject, depending on the course and the college and what you want to do. That being said, there's different points for different courses and for teaching colleges, and it's very, very difficult. It can be really hard, especially if you're trying to hit over like the 400 mark. Like for a lot of students, that's really, really hard work. And then you might have some students that will be in the higher 400s and they're pushing to get over into the 500s. And, you're competing against all the other students sitting the Leaving Cert. So,
yeah. And that's a lot of pressure to put on somebody who's 16, 17, 18 years old.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I had primary teaching down and I didn't get the points. And for many people, it's the exact same thing. They don't get the points. It's really tough to find your feet again. And, then you're studying something that you might not be interested in. And then maybe you might be interested in, you just don't know. But, it's not cheap to go to college as well. So it is the financial burden of it too. So yeah.
Yeah. So the points dictate also what school that you get into and what subjects you're allowed to take in your higher education. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously you said you didn't get in. That was your passion, but you didn't get in. What was your undergraduate degree in?
Yeah, so I decided to go to Maynooth University. I did my undergrad in geography and sociology, and I also took Gaeilge Irish in my first year. So after your first year, you drop a subject. So for me, I just wanted to show an interest in Irish. I wanted to keep it up the extra year because I knew that would stand to me at some point in the future when I'd want to sit for and go for the PME. So I did my undergrad in geography and sociology and loved it at the time. Like it was a good two subjects that go well together. And then I worked as well part-time while I was studying. So yeah, it was good.
And was your plan always to go on to the PME to go on to the professional master's in education after you finished your undergraduate?
Yeah, it was. Like I would have probably liked to have gone straight into it, but then I met my boyfriend and we decided to go to Toronto together. I ended up like we were only going to stay for like 3 months. It ended up being a year. Then we got really good jobs, and then we were like, okay, we'll stay another year. I'm so happy we did that, because let's look at the last year and a bit that we've had, and we've not been able to travel. So I'm grateful I went when I did.
Yeah, and there's actually something to be said about that ability to kind of have a year or two of maturing and growing, some self growth and some, learning some new things about yourself. And obviously, what you did was went to Canada in between your undergraduate and before starting your application for the professional master's in education. So, do you think that your journey to the PME was difficult, and if it was, in what ways, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, it was certainly difficult, because I knew that this is what I wanted, and I wasn't going to stop until I got to that point. Like you can't take a step back when you know something is for you. You can't start doubting yourself. You have to keep pushing for it, because you know in your heart where you're going to be most happy, and you know when you've got experience in something, and you've guided, or you've led, young children in other ways, like such as the Girl Guides for me. You know what your passion is, and if you can make a living from that, well, then you've hit gold, in my opinion. And yeah, okay, it might have taken me an extra 6 months or whatever it was, but like it will happen. It is tough though. It's competitive, and especially with having to speak the Irish language and stuff, that's really, really a hindrance for many in Ireland.
Yeah, and that's actually another point to say again for my international listeners, is that here in Ireland, in order to teach at the primary school level, you have to have a specific level of understanding both written and spoken Irish. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
And for post-primary, that is not the case. If you wanted to be a post-primary teacher, that you do not have to have that requirement. But in primary, there is still that requirement there, which we know poses a whole new host of issues. That requirement in sort of the diversity of the teachers who teach the students. But that's another story for another day, or another conversation for another day.
Yeah.
So Hayley, where are you on your journey now, and what do you envision for your future as a primary school teacher?
So at the moment, I just finished my first school placement, which was great. I was teaching fourth class, so fourth grade. Thoroughly enjoyed the experience. It was my first time setting foot into a classroom. It shocked me how, I suppose I was quite lucky. I had a very well behaved class. It just shocked me how like cooperative and how respectful the students were. Not that it shocked me, but I didn't, like, I expected maybe, children to be children, but they were just so mature and just so respectful. And I was expecting maybe a child to be jumping out of their seats all the time, or not listening to me. And I have to say, I was very blessed that I was actually able to teach the class that I was put with. So yeah, it was a great experience. I learned a lot from it. It'll be interesting now for me to compare that to a different class or a different school even. And that's where I'm excited now to kind of get my head around it, because that's all I know is that one class in that one school. So it's really important to me now that I kind of broaden my horizons and see what else is out there. Because just to inform me and my teaching.
Yeah, and that was exactly what I was thinking. And you said it just as I was thinking, was, it's good to broaden your horizons and have the ability to do your second placement in a different school, a different type of school, a different, obviously, class of students, and, to really get a good idea for the future, what your plan is, because at this point, you're not really sure probably what age, range that you really, after first placement, yep, you had a great experience, and it may be the best experience that you have, and you think to yourself, okay, I definitely want to teach fourth your students. So now we're going to talk about your Instagram platform, and you're an influencer, Hayley.
Oh, well, I don't know about the title, but no, I set up that Instagram page. Gosh, it was a month after I moved back from Canada. And I moved back in September, set up the page in October, and got into the PME the following September. So I nearly had the page a year before I got in. And to me, it was just a great way to connect with like-minded people. And then it was actually something I avoided then when I didn't get into the masters the first time, because to be honest with you, Shelly-Ann, it really upset me because I was seeing people doing my passion that I wanted to do. And I had to take a step back. But then when I got in, like obviously I could pick the phone up again and go back on. And I think why it's my page, I actually got asked this quite recently. I think why my page has grown is because a lot of people can relate to it. It's raw, it's real, it's a first-hand insight. And it also shows where I didn't get in and then I did get in. And a lot of students don't start their page until after they get accepted. Now, I didn't do that purposely. It's just the way it so happened. But I've always had an interest in social media. I've always had an interest in that kind of world. I think maybe if I wasn't a teacher or going to be a teacher, I'd say I would have fallen into working maybe for a company on their social media platforms or something along the lines, or something like that.
Yeah, and just again for some background here for the listeners, Hayley's Instagram platform is at the teacher student, and she is very, very close to 10,000 followers, like
I know.
very, very close to 10,000. So if you're interested in checking out what Hayley does, and like she said, how real and how raw she is, definitely go give her a like and a follow, and see what she does. But I love watching. It's so funny because I'll sit here and I'll watch every single one of your little bits when you go from, on your stories one to the other, because I'm waiting to say, like, what is that nugget of wisdom that Hayley's going to give next? And you'll be seeing her like cutting out some of her resources right there, and showing people how she puts together some of her ideas and resources. And you share very willingly and very openly and very freely as far as like what your resources are, what works, what doesn't. You've been on there. I remember as you were preparing for placement, watching you, you came on and you did one of your reels. You showed all the different outfits you were planning to wear.
Yeah.
On placement. You did a little placement fashion show. And again, I think that that's something that teachers or those who are going through the same process as you, or just starting, really appreciate.
Absolutely. But even like the accounts that I have been watching that are 6 months ahead of me or a year ahead of me or 2 years ahead of me, it sets me up mentally about like what I'm about to achieve or what I'm about to do. Like for me, like when I started the masters, like I've been working my way up to the first school placement. That's where you're out in the classroom. And now that that's over, I'm a bit, not that I'm a bit confused or lost in terms of where I'm heading like overall, but I'm a bit confused because I'm like, oh God, I didn't think much about it until now. Like I was more thinking all the way up until school placements now happened, and it's like, what's happening now?
Yeah. So you just need a minute or two to collect yourself and find out what's, it is interesting because you always put up, Q&A boxes, and you always get a plethora of questions. People are always asking you. They're very curious. Yeah. Did you imagine gaining such a following?
No, I actually didn't. It's weird. I love all the people that follow me. Like people do reach out and message, and for the most part, everyone's just so pleasant and polite. I just don't know. Like I'm no expert, and I always say that I actually have no idea. I have no problem saying I don't know. And I think for some people that can be quite difficult, I think, to do, to say I actually don't know. Like maybe, and I'll tag an account that might know, and then maybe they'll repost and they'll be able to answer the question. I think it's just about helping each other. And I think especially my page might have grown because all of us were working from home or studying from home, and we haven't had the opportunity to meet in person. And I remember when I got accepted into the course, I remember some pages had posted things like, well, when I was doing my PME, I wasn't able to run like an Instagram account. And it's like, well, when you were doing your PME, things were open and you could actually go to the bar and you could go and have a dance. Whereas with us, it's like, this is it. Like, this is our social life. We don't have the opportunity to meet in person. There's so many people in my course I have not met. I have not met my lecturers, haven't met anyone. Never got a formal induction because that just wasn't possible because of COVID. So hopefully now in the next year, I will be able to experience that. But I think because we were all at home, we're all on our phones, and that was our safety net. That was where we could go. Apart from the online, like, actual lecturing interactions, the social media, that was where, like, I suppose the social life or the fun was.
Yeah, and you're essentially, they talk about COVID babies and how COVID babies are learning to cope with, being out on the streets and actually kind of seeing people's faces every now and then and looking at, small crowds of people. And, your initial teacher education COVID baby, you started your journey during this, and it's going to be very interesting when your lecturers like me are not just a disembodied sort of head and shoulders, and
Yeah,
we become real people for you. But
I know. It's funny because I have met the odd few in my class, and the first thing I'm like, oh my God, you're real. Like, it's weird. And like, even one of the days I was actually down in I was in Butler's, I was getting my coffee, and obviously we're all wearing masks, and I was getting a phone call from one of the guys in my class, and I was like, I was actually on the phone to my other friend, and I said, sorry, one of the guys in my class trying to call me, and he doesn't call me often. Like, he doesn't call me at all. And I was like, sorry, I just have to go. I need to take this. And I took the call, and they were like, oh, Hayley, I'm in the line. I'm looking at you. And it's like, oh, no way. Like, isn't that mad though? Like, we couldn't tell because of the face masks, and it's all just awkward. And there was no, yeah, it was just one of those freak things. But yeah.
So, Voltaire has this great saying that, and it's one that everybody knows, that with great power comes great responsibility. What do you envisage for your Instagram platform to be for others?
I suppose it should be a place where they're not overwhelmed with information. I think there's so much information online that can be so overwhelming. I know myself, when I read a post and it's just so much information and it's not broken down visually. Like, I don't want people to come onto my page and read something and get really stressed out and then have to, like, click off. Like, I don't want anyone feeling ever stressed or overwhelmed and they can't break it down. So, I think some posts can sometimes be too wordy, or there's too much going on and I don't know what I'm looking at and I can't read that entire thing. And like, I like things spaced out and broken down, and I hopefully when people go onto my page, they feel like they can breathe, and they can play, like, at their leisure, they can scroll.
Mhm. And you are definitely living your experience on Instagram. Your experience of initial teacher education. You're living the PME, up close and in real time
Yeah,
for others, again, who might be a bit behind, or those who might be a bit ahead. And and then there is that sense of belonging and that sense of community that I think that you're creating there. Um,
absolutely.
so I know you said earlier, some people say, I would have never been able to do Instagram. How do you manage? What does Hayley do to be able to manage your student workload and also your positive and encouraging engagement on Instagram?
Well, I think it's fair to say that I haven't been working up until this point. I took a break after working for 3 years straight. I wasn't working, and I think that's very clear. Like, that's very important to note, because I wasn't subbing. Schools were closed. I wasn't, I was fully focused on my studies. So, we couldn't go anywhere. So I did have all this time that I could put into my Instagram page. So that's actually something I'm gonna have to learn, Shelly-Ann, over the next few weeks now, me starting to sub and me trying to focus or balance my Instagram. And am I going to be able to post as frequently? Am I going to be able to come on as frequently? Like, I know I did explicitly mention that on school placement that I was taking a step back, and I did take a step back. It's just, it was just way too much. I had to take my time for myself in the evening. Even with that, like, that was even hard to fit in, so that's going to be something now that I'm going to have to figure out, you know.
And I'm sure that you're going to do it with grace and ease. And again, a very positive attitude and a big smile on your face as you might stumble here and there, but there's always that big smile on your face.
Thanks.
What kinds of things do you like to do for Hayley? So to manage your own wellness and your sense of well-being, being that you are a PME COVID baby, what are some things that you've been doing to manage your own wellness?
I'd go for a coffee. That was my outing every day. With my dad, the two of us, we'd go down. Now he wouldn't get a coffee, but he'd come with me, and it was just kind of that quality, family time. As well as that, I try to go out for my walk. I'm very religious with my watch on my wrist, and I count my steps. I was making sure I was getting my exercise. I suppose making sure that I call my friends frequently, that really helped. Just not only with like the getting through that difficult time, but also just making sure that everyone is okay, and hearing how their day went that was different to yours, because I don't know, looking at the four walls around you, you can start to go a bit mad. I'm trying to think, like, what else did I do? Like, just making sure, like, I set up my own desk space. That was really important to me at the start of the PME. It was just really important that I had somewhere to go. And then when I'm not at the desk, I'm not working. So that was something that I did for me, where I could, manage that, like studying and life. Like it's two separate places that I can go to. And it's actually funny, Shelly Ann, because I did my degree in geography and sociology. So when you say things like community, sense of belonging, all this comes back to me, and I'm like, all about identity, and maybe like what's the Goffman.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so he talked about like front stage, backstage, and it's not always plain sailing. That's the other thing about Instagram. It's not always like, you don't know what's actually going on in someone's life, so it's always important to be kind as well.
Yep, absolutely. Good point there. There's a bit of that responsibility there.
Yeah.
So we're now at the point in our conversation when I always like to ask my guests to share some resources, some links or book recommendations that can be helpful for anyone that's interested maybe in volunteering or getting started in surviving their own PME journey, or becoming a social vlogger or influencer. Do you have do you have any resources that you can think of that you'd like to share?
Resources. Let me think. Well, I would recommend, if anyone ever wanted to start getting experience with working with children and they don't know where to look, I would look at the Irish Girl Guides or Scouting Ireland. I'd look at those two organizations and see, would that be something that maybe you could do even on a monthly basis? That's number one. Number two, what I'd say is, if you are looking to like do, so I get asked this actually quite a lot. Like I'm people say to me, oh, well, I'm 30 now, and I want to be a primary school teacher, but I'm afraid I'm going to be too old. And I say to them, but how old are you going to be in 2 years? And they're like, well, I'm going to be 32. And I say, well, what are you going to be doing in 2 years' time? Well, I'm going to be still doing what I'm doing. I'm still going to be unhappy. And it's like, well, whether you want to admit it or not, you're going to age. And what's important is your happiness. What's important is that you're passionate and you're happy about what you're doing. So regardless of your age, who actually cares? Doesn't matter how old you are. Once you're happy and you're doing what you want to do, where you want to make a difference. So what I say to those people is, number one, especially in the college I'm in, there's so many students of all different ages that I would never let age make you turn you down. Because myself, I had those thoughts. I'm like, oh God, I'm 25 now. I'm going to be this age and this. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what age you are. You can change career whenever you want and whenever you feel, and that's okay to note. So I would say that, I don't even know if that's a resource, but that's just a point that I had to make.
I'm glad that you did.
Yeah, no, I just had to make that point, because it's so, like, I think we can all get bogged down by that. Like, it's all this hypothetical stuff that we're making in our head, but the reality of the fact is, you have to live in the moment and you have to do what's right for you.
Yeah,
you're going to age regardless.
Yep.
That's just life.
Time's going to keep on marching forward. So it can either march forward in the same place that you are, like you said, and be unhappy. You said it beautifully. I'm not even going to repeat it because I'll butcher the beauty in which you said it. So,
Okay.
Hayley, you, again, I know that everybody who's listening is going to say, they're all going to hear the same thing. You're full of joy and positivity, and it really is infectious. I actually think that you could even be more contagious than COVID. That's my thought. That is what I believe.
I feel flattered because when you hear these things about yourself, like, I'm like, really? Like, because I see people like that, in my life, and I'm like, God, they're so full of energy, or they're so full of happiness, and I feed off that. So, for everyone, like, I think there's always going to be people that make you feel good. And what I will say is, like, and I know this is a new kind of thing. Sorry now, Shelley, I might go on a little bit of a tangent. However, I think especially with social media now, and we're spending so much time online, and I know lockdowns are lifting, but in some parts of the world they're not. I think it's really important to follow accounts that do make you feel good and that do inspire you and make you feel productive. There's no point going on to some page that makes you feel down and unhappy. And I think that's really important for your own head and your well-being and for your own productivity as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
So do you have, listen, these past 5 minutes, I think you have given so many nuggets of wisdom, but I'm just going to say it one more time. I'm going to ask you, do you have any final words of inspiration or encouragement that you might want to share with those who have been listening? And again, maybe somebody who's thinking about stepping into this journey, somebody who's thinking about volunteering, somebody who's thinking about, becoming a teacher or anything like that. Do you have any final words of wisdom?
I'd say don't let the fear of it frighten you, or don't think that you're not good enough. Because I know for some people they might think, oh, well, I'll never be like this or I'll never be like that, but you're good at you. So don't let that stop you. And it's always going to be a process, and we're always learning. Like, I've often thought, will I change my Instagram name after I finish the PME from the teacher student? But we're all students in our own way. We're all always learning. So don't ever feel that you'll never be good enough, or that you won't get there, because there is no get there. You're always going to be working on it.
Yep, that's right. Learning is lifelong, never stop, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hayley, it has been an absolute pleasure spending this near an hour with you, having a chat, and I've really enjoyed the conversation, and thank you so much. And I do look forward to seeing and hearing from you again in the future, to see where you are in your journey. And again, everybody who's listening, if you want to check out and see Hayley up close and personal, definitely get on Instagram and go find @theteacherstudent, and you will find Hayley going through her lived experience in real time, her journey through the PME. Thank you so much, Hayley.
Thanks for having me, Shelley Ann. I loved it.
Me too. I hope that you've enjoyed this discussion on A Dash of Salt, a space where you'll always find fresh and current discussions on society and learning today, seasoned with just the right touch of experts in education and a dash of sociological imagination. Please be sure to like and share this episode, and don't forget to subscribe to A Dash of Salt on Podbean so that you don't miss the next episode. Thanks so much, and we'll chat again soon.